Hello everyone and welcome to this Chess Legends video entitled Learn from the Best. And of course I am not the best chess player, but what I do mean by that is that you can improve your chess by learning from the games of the greatest chess masters from the past and present. And so today we will look at a game of Robert Fischer or Bobby Fischer. So this game looks like, excuse me, it was played in 1971. And this is an interesting game because it looks like he's playing against Walter Shipman. And according to this, his rating was 2192. And of course, Fischer 2760 here. So this will be a good example of how a much better player uses his extra chess ability against a lower rated opponent. So let's see what Fischer does here. All right, and if we look at the game review here, it's interesting to see Fischer had a 91.1% accuracy rate compared to 79.6% by his opponent. Let's see here. Fischer played at a 2700 rating in this game and his opponent 2150. And looks like opening accuracy 100% for Fischer compared to 93.5 by his opponent, and 88.1 in the middle game to 71.3. So we just see that, Fischer's opening knowledge was more advanced, and his just all-around middle game play was better. So let's dive in and look and see what Fischer did here. So the game begins with e4, which Fischer said at one point that this is best by test, that he tested out different opening moves, and he felt that e4 was the best, as it allows the bishop to develop, the queen could move as well, and e4 leads to a more open attacking position usually, because the central pawns many times are traded away, giving the pieces more room to maneuver and attack. And of course this move also helps control the d5 square. All right, so the opponent responds with e5, copying Fischer's moves, and knight to f3 is played, immediately attacking this central pawn. And now knight to c6 covers this pawn, and now bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez. So this move attacks the knight, putting pressure on this pawn, as if the knight is captured, then the pawn will be undefended. But if the knight were to capture after the bishop captures this protective knight, well, the queen could move here, attacking the knight, and put pressure on this pawn in the center. So, or if this pawn captures the knight after the bishop captures, the queen could just move into the center, attacking the pawn and the knight. All right, so on to the next move. Knight at g to e7. So you don't see this as often. This is, I believe, the Cosio defense variation to the Ruy Lopez here. And so this move basically backs up the knight, but it does block in this bishop here. So, maybe the pawn could move forward to g6 and the bishop could fianchetto here. But let's see what happens next. c3 is played by Fischer, and this will prepare a d4 pawn advance, and it'll be backed up by this c pawn. All right, so immediately Fischer's opponent plays d5, trying to fight for control in the center, counterattacking this pawn. Also now, if this pawn is captured, the queen could come out to the center and not have to worry about the knight chasing it away by knight to c3 because this pawn is in the way now. All right, so knight to e5 is played, which the computer says that is the best move in this position, adding more pressure to this pinned knight. And so now we have the d pawn capturing on e4 here, and the queen immediately attacks this pawn. So black decides to defend the pawn with the queen to d5, and at the same time attacking this knight here. But the computer says this is a mistake, that bishop to e6 would have been better here, just developing this bishop. So, quite interesting here. Looks like the computer would prefer to just leave this pawn unprotected. All right. Well, now Fischer attacks, capturing this c6 knight, and as this knight was under attack by the queen, and it says that this is the best, it is a great move here by Fischer, and the opponent responds by just capturing, although the computer prefers doubling these pawns and chasing the bishop away. So interesting. But Fischer's opponent didn't want to break up his pawns, and it moves this knight out of the way of the bishop here. And so now we have d4. A great move by Fischer, as this e-pawn cannot capture en passant because it is pinned by the queen to the king here. And this also takes some control of the center and allows this bishop room to develop as well. Okay, now we have bishop to f5, just continuing development and preparing to castle queenside. All right, knight to d2, just adding some pressure on this pawn and developing this knight, although now the bishop is blocked in. But Fischer's opponent castles queenside, and now we have a battery here on this half open d file, but this pawn is pretty well protected here, fortified by the c pawn. And so Fischer continues by castling himself. And now we have an opposite side castling game. And so usually in these types of positions, it can become a race where pawns will be pushed, trying to pawn storm your opponent, because now white can push his queenside pawns and not have to worry about the king being there. If both sides castled on the same side, then you normally wouldn't want to push your pawns in front of your king, as it could create weaknesses. But here, black may decide to push his pawns forward, and white could push his as well, and it may be a race. But in the game, bishop to g6 was played, which the computer says that is the best move. It just kind of backs the bishop up, keeping it protected, well protected by these pawns in case the queen would have to move. But anyway, now we have the knight repositioning here to allow this bishop room to develop. And also, perhaps Fischer wanted to keep this knight from being able to try and jump to a5 and maybe c4, or Fischer just wanted to move this knight closer to the queen side over here to help prepare an attack on black's king. And it looks like the computer prefers just rook to e1, putting more pressure on this half-open e-file, maybe preparing to pile up on this pawn here on e4. But Fischer instead decides to move his knight, and prepare to develop the bishop. And in response, f5 is played, which the computer says that this is a miss by Fischer's opponent, and that instead bishop to h5 should have been played. So if we go back, bishop to h5, maybe that would be a harder move to see, but if bishop to h5, the queen would have to move, and so it's hard to say. What would Fischer do? He would have to protect this bishop, so maybe he would have to move up here and attack the queen. So anyway, Fischer's opponent did not find the best move of bishop to h5, and instead we had f5 and now e3. So once again, the computer says that bishop to g5 would have been better, but Fischer probably wanted to keep his bishop pair. If he moved to g5, perhaps bishop to e7 could have been played, attacking the bishop here. So perhaps Fischer did not want to trade off pieces and wanted to save them for an attack, as now this bishop is aimed at the queen side over here. If this d-pawn moves eventually, that bishop may be able to be used for an attack. All right, and now queen to f7. A blunder is played by Fischer's opponent. And it looks like, once again, bishop to h5 would have been best. But maybe this move was hard to see, as now the bishop is unprotected. But if the bishop is captured, then black could capture white's bishop here as well, and it would be an even trade. But Fischer's opponent did not see this, and instead plays a blunder with queen to f7 here. All right, so now this move allows Fischer to capture. A great move here. And let's take a look and see if that is the best move. Yes, by quite a margin, that was the best move, to break up the queenside pawns here. So after b takes c6, we have queen to a6 with check, and now Fischer begins his attack here. All right, so the king, perhaps, well, here black is in trouble already. If the king tried to move here to b8 to protect this pawn, well, there is the possibility of this knight jumping up here to a5 and threatening a mate in 1. And then, what could be done about that? Looks like nothing. So in his run to safety, Fischer's opponent just retreats his king away to d7. But now we have the knight moving up to a5 anyway, and now there's a threat of capturing this pawn with check, sending this king running even further. So queen to e6 is played to help protect the c6 pawn. And now c4 is played. And so this may help to push this d pawn forward, where it will be protected by the c pawn, and try and break open the position here. So bishop to e7 is played, trying to connect the two rooks. And now rook to d1, just lining up on this king and helping to prepare this d pawn push forward. And that's always a good strategy when your opponent's king is stuck in the center and has not castled. It's generally a good idea to try and break open the center as quick as possible and try and use your pieces after you break open the center to flood them in towards the enemy king. All right, so rook to b8 is played, which it says that's a good move, but queen to f6, it appears, would have been better. But now we have d5, getting ready to break open the center and go after the king. So pawn captures. Now we have rook captures with check, and bishop to d6, blocking here. But now it looks like Fischer, maybe could possibly just play this pawn push forward, and it would be, well, excuse me, I guess he can't play that because the queen could just capture there. So I take that back. In the game, rook at a to d1 is played, just piling up here, and now there's this threat of the c pawn pushing forward as the bishop is pinned, and now that the rooks have been doubled, the queen could not capture here. All right, so we have king to e7. The king tries to retreat away, but now a knight fork. So Fischer just presses forward with his attack, forking the king and this rook. The king runs away, and of course the knight captures. Rook recaptures, but now we have a brilliant move by Fischer. He exchanges his rook for the bishop here, and now the queen cannot capture, of course, or we just have rook captures. So once the pawn captures, now queen takes a7, a fork, checking the king and attacking the rook at the same time. So here, Walter Shipman, Fischer's opponent, resigned, as the game may have continued with let's see here. King to g8. But then, the queen would just capture. And now white is just ahead in material if bishop to e8 is played. Well, now we have the rook capturing the pawn, attacking the queen. If the queen moves up, now we have just the rook retreating. And also Fischer has these 3 passed pawns. So, the game would have just been hopeless if h6 was played. Well, then c5. One of the pawns just starts marching up the board. All right, well, I hope you were able to learn a little bit from this game by a chess legend, former world champion, Bobby Fischer, who quit playing chess after he became the world champion. He did not defend his title, so he became world champion in 1972, and I believe in 75 he was due to defend his title against Anatoly Karpov, but he wouldn't agree to the rules of the tournament and the world championship match, and so he just ended up refusing to play, and his title was forfeited to Anatoly Karpov. So it's a shame that we didn't see more games by Fischer because of that. And just remember, you can learn from the best players throughout history and even present players just by going over their games, seeing what they do, learning from them, looking at their tactics, their strategies, how they play the end game. There's just a wealth of knowledge that you can gain just by playing over the games of the best players. And one great way to do that is to hide their move, and after the opponent moves, try and guess what the best players in the world would play next. So just go through their games and without looking at their moves, try to guess what their next move would be. And then when you think you have it, check your answer and see how you compare to their moves. And, hopefully you'll get some of the same moves that they make. But I'm sure you'll often be surprised at some of the brilliant moves that they come up with. All right, well, I hope this video was informative and helped you to improve your chess. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.